Good morning from Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. My name is John Kyo, and welcome to another 10 by 10 series. In this series, I'll speak with 10 experts for 10 minutes on different aspects of digital transformation of the agri-food sector across emerging economies. And this morning, I'm delighted to have with me Michael Dossor. Michael, you're in Australia, so it's good afternoon to you.
Yeah, it is. It is, having just returned from a 4-week expedition of Europe, back in the office first day. So I'm feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, mate.
Wonderful. That's great. Listen, Michael, the 10 minutes goes very, very quickly. So in the first minute, can you tell us a little bit about you and also your company?
So yeah, let's start with me. 35 years in the packaging technology sector, going through all sorts of things from machinery to software technology, etc. Labeling, coding, and marking predominantly from a technical into a sales and marketing, and now having the delight of running my own business. Result Group, 4 business units: product ID, which is where all of our traceability solutions sit, whether that be coding and marking and labeling, and platforms themselves of various shapes and sizes, through to work within value-added packaging. So we do a lot of deployment within promotional marketing, which also involves traceability, into self-adhesive materials, into the label industry, and process automation. So we've got a 24/7 technical support infrastructure to back that all up. There's the elevator pitch, mate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The areas that I know and love very, very well as well: supply chain, traceability, and so on. But listen, let's talk about digital transformation, agri-food, emerging economies. What has been your experience? What are you seeing out in the field?
Learning. There's a lot of learning going on at a government level. There's a lot of learning going on at a brand ownership level, and trying to bring all of that together. To use the point, I think the word is collaboration. There's a lot of collaboration going on, and everybody trying to find their way.
So on that collaboration, can you give examples of that? Is that big companies collaborating with their supply chains, their extended supply chains, or is it competitors collaborating?
I think all of the above. We've embedded ourselves. I'm lucky enough to be one of the co-chairs of the GS1 Traceability Solution Providers Group here in Australia. I think you've seen we're quite active. So there's a lot of collaboration going on and work in making sure we understand what interoperability means between us. We've again been lucky enough to work on a number of projects in that space with the work we've done with Australian table grapes. So it's not so much competitors working together, but supporting technologies working together and making sure that interoperability is at the forefront. But also the collaboration between the supply chain partners, whether that be an importer where you are in Vietnam and a brand owner here in Australia, and then the supply chain as products go through the supply chain internally within Vietnam. So a lot of learning and a lot of collaboration and a lot of understanding going on.
Wonderful. Now, you brought up something that's very important, the GS1 communities, where in fact competitors do collaborate to get standards out there. So we have a structured way of communicating with each other and capturing, recording, and sharing information. So that's vital. But what are you seeing in emerging economies? So let's say that, where you are in your back door, your back garden is Australia, pretty mature, doing some great work. You just came back from 4 weeks in Europe, also, pretty mature in Europe. What are you seeing outside of that? And what are the key challenges in the emerging economies?
I think that where do I start? Australia positioning ourselves to be at the forefront of what's needed in those markets is the main thing. We're seeing a bunch of requirements come through that have always been in the background, but the digitization of those requirements is what's coming to the forefront, and we're making sure that our solutions match those requirements. And those requirements, what they are today, they're evolving at a rate that is so fast that everybody's sitting there going, how do I deal with that? How do I cope with that? And that's the biggest challenge that I'm seeing, and that's the biggest focus that we've put on the solutions that we're building. What we're doing today in a particular market or an emerging an economy, will be point A today, but it could be point B tomorrow. We need to make sure that the solutions we're putting forward can pivot around those requirements that vary from market to market. When the FDA makes a call in the US, some countries tend to follow. Others want to set their own path. So we've got to be flexible enough to deal with what those economies are looking for.
So I think that's an important point you bring up, watching what other economies are doing, like the US, the FDA coming out with requirements that does have a cascading effect across the world, because the US suppliers will, of course, source from over 200 countries. But let's say you have a small emerging economy. Let's say you have a big Australian company who wants to source from Southeast Asia or from Vietnam. How would you typically approach that? Let's say if you come over to Vietnam and you want to connect the supply chain in Vietnam with Australia. So you're talking about, packaging, labeling, marking, identifying products and so on. How would you approach that in these emerging economies, considering resource shortages and maybe a lack of cash?
So that's a really important point. I think the answer is quite simple. It's a deep dive and it's an understand. So the first thing that we do, whether that be a customer here in Australia or whether it be one offshore, we want to understand what that supply chain is doing now. What systems are they using, and make sure that we can deal with those things. If we can deal with the data that's coming out of those systems and we can accept that data into our platform, we're removing the barrier to entry as far as the cost side of things is concerned. We don't want to walk into any environment anywhere in the world and introduce change. The minute that we do that is the minute that it all falls over and becomes too hard.
So understanding the current environment, the technologies, the processes, all very, very relevant. But in a lot of the emerging economies, they're suffering from a brain drain. So some of their best and brightest have actually left. And some of the technologies they're using may be actually quite dated, 10, 15 years old. How do you deal with that?
Go back to basics. The technology that we're working with, we all use, we're famous for the acronyms that we roll out within an IT environment, but data's been shared for a very long time. It might be as simple as I can pick up a file on my computer and I can share it with you in Vietnam. It's what we do with that file when we get it. So if we need to, we just break it down to very basic transactional data. It's then once we get that data, the magic of the product clouds that we're all working with will accept that data and enable us to be able to work with it. It comes back again to being able to deal with the simple as well as the complex. And I think the first thing that we do is we tend to look at the world's major brands who have got very evolved systems, and sometimes the little guys get forgotten. And we've got to make sure that that does not happen.
Yeah, that's very, very important. And I think 80% of GS1 members are actually small, medium enterprises. So they do go down to the lowest common denominator. But when you look at the role of government, what is the role of a government in enabling industry within that country, within that environment, to actually digitally transform?
Again, I think the supporting of the industry partners that they're working with. I mean, we've been involved in the last 12 months with a project with the Victorian Department of Agriculture and rolling out our program with the Australian Table Grapes Association. That encompasses over 400 growers. It's an export market for us of 600 million of a total of $800 million worth of export of product. Huge businesses. We have the same problem or same challenge here in Australia. There's very evolved customers within that growing network, but there's also very small ones that are working with an Excel-based way of capturing their picking data. We need to be able to work with those things. So the government to be able to understand and embrace what data can be collected, whether it's simple or complicated, and actually making sure that any standards that are put forward enable everybody to play in this space is vitally important. The GS1 standards are a typical example of that, John. Everybody's using them, and they are a global standard. They're the key to interoperability and the key to international transactions.
Of course, and of course, the key to driving compliance with regulations. So in the last minute or so, Michael, what guidance would you give if you were up in front of 50 different companies? They're small, medium enterprises from an emerging economy. They want to trade with big companies abroad. What guidance would you give these CEOs of these small companies with regard to digital transformation?
I think the most important word for anybody to understand is scalability. what we're doing today. You don't have to have a system that is all the bells and whistles from day one. If you're going to work with a provider or you're going to work with a technology partner, make sure that their solution is scalable so it can evolve with your business. It's that simple. We tend to do a deep dive and think we need to capture every piece of information right from the start. That can evolve over time. So I think scalability is the biggest piece of advice that I could give to anybody. Make sure that you select somebody that can scale with your business.
Wonderful. Folks, there you go. There you have it, all the way from Australia, Michael Dossor. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us this morning.
All right, thanks for having me, John.
Cheers.